Last week, I sat across from an elementary school teacher in Seoul who was staring at a class roster for the upcoming 2026 semester. She wasn't frustrated. She looked more like she was witnessing a magic trick where the audience had suddenly vanished. I used to need 2 assistants for the first grade orientation, she told me, tracing a finger over a list of names that barely filled half a page. Now I'm wondering if I'll even have enough kids to form a single football team. What was strange wasn't just the numbers. We've heard the grim statistics for years, but the atmosphere of the city surrounding her. In the same cafe, you could see dozens of young professionals, flawlessly dressed and perfectly groomed, completely absorbed in their private digital worlds. They reminded me of the beautiful ones from John Calhoun's famous Universe 25 experiments. The rodents who, when faced with extreme social density and a world of abundance, simply stopped interacting, stopped competing, and stopped reproducing. They didn't look miserable. They looked terrifyingly content in their detachment. One man at the next table was smiling at a joke made by an AI companion on his screen, a digital entity that provides all the dopamine hits of intimacy with none of the messy biological costs of a real human relationship. It felt like watching an evolutionary cuckoo's egg in real time, a synthetic reality that has successfully hijacked our deepest hardwired drives. This isn't just a story about a declining birth rate or an expensive housing market. It's a document of a biological retreat. We are witnessing the first large-scale instance of the human brain performing a cold, unconscious cost-benefit analysis and deciding that the game of survival is no longer worth the investment. Why are the first graders vanishing? Because we have entered a behavioral sink where our ancient instincts are being outmaneuvered by a world of our own making. To understand why 2026 feels like a demographic vacuum, we have to look past the spreadsheets and into the glitching code of the Stone Age mind.
Wow. I mean, that's a heavy way to open the door, but I honestly think it's the only accurate lens we have left.
It feels like it. We always talk about this crisis in terms of tax incentives or housing subsidies.
I'll see failure. That's the usual headline.
Right. But the sources we're looking at today, they suggest something. Well, something much more primal is at work.
Exactly. We are looking at a fundamental evolutionary mismatch. That's really the core of it.
And we have a massive stack of research here for this deep dive. We've got everything from these anonymous forum posts out of Seoul to, deep evolutionary psychology papers, reports from the Institute for Family Studies.
And of course, the original research on those rodent experiments, which is chilling, to say the least.
It really is. So the mission today isn't to debate government spending. It's to try and figure out why the human animal, specifically in these hypermodern environments, is essentially pressing the stop button on its own genetic line.
It's a clash, isn't it? It's a clash between the hardware we evolved with over millions of years, our brains, our hormones, our stress responses, and the software environment of the mid-2020s.
So let's unpack this. We have to start with the environment itself, because when you look at a place like Seoul or Tokyo or even parts of New York or London, on the surface, it looks like a paradise of convenience.
It does. You have safety, you have food, you have connectivity, everything you could want.
But if you dig into the psychology of the people actually living inside that paradise, it feels very different.
It feels crowded. And that sensation of crowding isn't just an annoyance, it's a biological signal. A really powerful one.
So I want to share a story that really drove this home for me. I was scrolling through a series of anonymous posts on a Seoul-based community forum recently, and I came across this thread started by a guy. Let's call him Minjun. He's 29, a software researcher, smart guy, gainfully employed, but he lives in what's called a gosuwon.
Right. For those who don't know, that's basically a micro apartment, right?
Yeah.
A tiny living space.
Calling it an apartment is generous. I mean, it's a tiny windowless study room. Imagine a space so small that if you stand in the middle and stretch out your arms, you can literally touch both walls.
It's a box.
It's a box. And Minjun describes his daily life, specifically his commute on Seoul's Line 2 subway, as a sensory assault.
And that's the key word, right? Assault, not an inconvenience.
Yeah.
An assault.
He talks about the sheer density of human bodies triggering this primitive alarm in his brain, and he wrote something that really, really stuck with me.
What with that?
He said he hasn't felt attraction to anyone in years. Instead, every single person he sees just feels like a competitor.
A competitor for what?
For oxygen and space. That's how he put it. He wrote, and this is a quote, "When I finally get back to my room, the thought of inviting another person into my life feels like inviting a predator into a burrow."
Wow, inviting a predator into a burrow. That's not social anxiety, that's a survival instinct.
It's so intense, right? It's as if his internal survival mechanism has just looked at the crowded skyline of 2026 Seoul and concluded that the environment is full.
The server is full. Please try again later.
Exactly. And so it effectively switched off his reproductive drive just to ensure his own psychological survival. Reading this, I felt this profound sense of chill. As a journalist covering tech and society, I see this as the behavioral sync happening in real time.
You're absolutely right to flag that phrase. Minjun's reaction, it isn't a personality quirk. It's a predictable biological response to what John Calhoun called the behavioral sync.
I mentioned this in the intro. I think a lot of people have heard the term Universe 25 floating around the internet, usually attached to some kind of dystopian art. But I want to get into the gritty details of what that actually was, because it wasn't just mice in a box.
No, not at all. It was a carefully constructed, utopia, or what was supposed to be a utopia. This was back in the mid-20th century. Calhoun built this enclosure that eliminated every standard cause of death you could think of.
So,
unlimited food, unlimited water, zero disease, no predators, perfect climate control. The only thing that was limited was the physical space.
So on paper, it's the perfect welfare state for mice. No one goes hungry, no one gets eaten.
Precisely. And at first, it was a boom town. The population doubled every 55 days. It was, a mouse paradise.
Right.
As the population density hit a critical threshold, the social fabric didn't just fray, it completely disintegrated. The mice stopped acting like mice. Their fundamental behaviors just broke.
What does that look like? I mean, what does a mouse social collapse look like?
Well, it started with hyperaggression. Males couldn't establish territories because there were just too many other males packed in, so they just started attacking randomly, viciously. Then the mothers, completely overwhelmed by the density and the constant chaos, they started abandoning their pups.
They just left them.
Or even worse, they attacked them. Cannibalism, infanticide, it all became common. But the most haunting development, and this is the one that maps so perfectly to Minjun and that cafe scene you described, was the emergence of a specific cohort that Calhoun called the beautiful ones.
The beautiful ones. It sounds like a pop group, but I'm guessing in this context, it's not a compliment.
Far from it. These were male mice that just withdrew. They withdrew completely from the violence and the chaos. They didn't fight. They didn't compete for status or mates.
So they were passive.
Completely passive. But crucially, they also withdrew from courtship. They stopped trying to mate entirely. All they did all day long was eat, sleep, and groom themselves. Obsessively. And because they weren't fighting or mating, their fur was sleek and perfect. No scars, no bald patches from stress. They looked beautiful.
But they were socially dead.
Exactly. They were functionally sterile. They had health. They had resources. They had everything they needed to survive. But the sheer density of the environment had rewritten their behavior to simply opt out of the genetic game.
That connects so directly to that image of the flawlessly groomed professionals in the cafe. They look perfect. They have the nice clothes, the skincare routines, the latest tech. But their social instincts, the messy, difficult instincts to pair bond and build a family are...
well, they seem to be offline.
Offline. That's a good way to put it. And this brings us back to Minjun on the subway. Humans have a cognitive limit. A concept known as Dunbar's number.
Right, from the anthropologist Robin Dunbar.
Exactly. His research suggests our brains evolved to manage a stable social network of about 150 people. In a hunter-gatherer context, if you saw a face, you knew who it was, or at least you knew their tribe.
Right. Every face had a context. Friend, foe, cousin.
But in a megacity like Seoul or New York, you see 150 strangers before you even get through the turnstile at the subway station. You see thousands of faces a day.
And to the Stone Age brain, what are those faces?
They're threats, or at best, they're competitors. To your limbic system, that ancient part of your brain, every stranger is a potential danger until proven otherwise.
So when you're in a city of 10 million people, your brain is constantly running a low-grade threat assessment. It never shuts off. And this keeps the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, permanently activated.
Okay, let's go deep on the HPA axis. We hear stress causes health problems all the time, but what is physically happening here that actually stops people from wanting to have kids?
Think of the HPA axis as your body's internal security system. When it trips, it floods your system with stress hormones, primarily cortisol.
The famous fight or flight response.
Right. In nature, a tiger jumps out, you get a huge cortisol spike, you use that energy to run away, and then the levels drop. The threat is gone. You go back to normal.
But in the city, the tiger never leaves. The crowd is always there. The competition is always there.
Exactly. So you're basically marinating in cortisol 24/7.
Yeah.
And the body is smart. It has a limited energy budget. If that internal security system is constantly screaming, danger, unsafe environment, high alert, the body starts to deprioritize what it considers non-essential functions.
And from a pure survival standpoint, reproduction is a luxury.
It's the ultimate luxury. It requires enormous resources and, crucially, a safe environment for vulnerable offspring. So that chronic HPA activation, that constant cortisol drip, it directly suppresses the reproductive system.
How so? Like, what's the mechanism?
It lowers testosterone in men. It disrupts ovulation cycles in women. It reduces libido in both. It's not just a conscious decision where Minjin sits down with a calculator and says rent is too high. It's a deeper physiological switch that gets flipped.
The body itself is saying abort mission.
The body is saying do not reproduce, survive. The brain interprets the high density not as a community, but as extreme resource-depleting competition, and it acts accordingly.
And we're seeing this play out in the hard data. The sources mention that South Korea's total fertility rate, the TFR, dropped to 0.81 back in 2021. And the government is projecting it might stabilize at a dismal 0.92 long term.
It's just catastrophic. We have to be really clear about the math here. Replacement level fertility, the rate at which a population stays stable, is 2.1 children per woman.
2.1, and they're at 0.92.
A rate of 0.92 means the population essentially halves with every generation. We're talking about a prediction, a serious one, that the population of South Korea could fall by 53% by the end of this century.
That's mind-boggling. A 50% reduction in a single human lifespan. That's not a decline, that's a demographic collapse.
And it's so crucial to understand that this isn't just about money. Governments around the world, especially in South Korea, have thrown billions, hundreds of billions of dollars at this problem.
Cash handouts, subsidies, state-funded daycare centers.
Everything. And it hasn't worked. It hasn't moved the needle. Because you can't pay someone enough to override a deep biological signal that is screaming at them that the world is a behavioral sink.
So, okay, we have the push factor, the density, the stress, the HPA axis screaming that the burrow is full and it's not safe. But it's not just that people are running away from each other.
Right, they're also running towards something else.
Because Minjin isn't just staring at the wall in his Gozi one, he's staring at a screen.
Yes, nature abhors a vacuum. If you remove genuine human connection, something else is going to rush in to fill that void.
And that brings us to the second part of this retreat. I recently watched a documentary clip about a woman, let's call her Jiwon. She lives in Incheon. She's professionally successful, smart, objectively what you'd call a catch, but she has completely opted out of the dating market.
Completely. As in, not interested at all.
Not in humans, no. Instead, she spends her evenings with Mina. Mina is an AI companion powered by the latest large language models.
Okay, so she's basically talking to a chatbot.
It's so much more than that now. I saw a screen recording of their interaction, and honestly, it was eerily perfect. Mina knows exactly when Jiwon is tired just from the way she's typing. She validates her frustrations about work without ever starting an argument. She provides this constant, calibrated dopamine hit of intimacy.
Without any of the messiness.
Without any of the biological or financial messiness of a real human partner. That was the word she used. Jiwon mentioned in an interview that the thought of a real boyfriend with his own flaws, needs, bad habits, and unpredictable emotions now feels analog and inefficient.
Analog and inefficient. That's how we talk about old hardware, not people.
It seems we are witnessing a supernormal stimulus hijack. Just as junk food hijacks our ancient craving for salt and sugar, these digital companions are hijacking our attachment circuits.
Supernormal stimulus is the exact right term here. It comes from the ethologist Nico Tinbergen. He won a Nobel for this work. He did these experiments with birds, specifically seagulls.
Right, and he built a fake egg.
He built a fake egg. It was giant, brightly painted with exaggerated speckles, basically a cartoon version of an egg. To us, it looked obviously fake, a piece of painted plaster.
But to the bird?
To the bird, it looked like the ultimate egg. It was a hyper trigger. It was more eggy than a real egg. And the birds would actually abandon their real, small, dull-colored eggs to go sit on this giant plaster fake.
They preferred the simulation.
They preferred the simulation because it triggered their instincts harder than reality did.
That is a perfect, terrifying metaphor for AI companionship. The AI is the giant plaster egg.
Exactly. Real relationships are the small, dull eggs. They have incredibly high costs. You have to invest time, you have to navigate conflict, you risk rejection. There's a massive financial investment if you have children.
Now contrast that with the AI.
The AI provides the validation, the dopamine hit of feeling understood with zero risk. It's calibrated to be infinitely patient, perfectly responsive. It never has a bad day. It never has its own needs.
It's the junk food of love. It tastes better than broccoli in the moment, so we starve ourselves on empty calories.
And the data is starting to support this in a big way. We have a report here from the Institute for Family Studies that's really quite startling. They found that 1 in 4 young adults, 25%, believe that AI partners could be a viable replacement for real-life romance.
1 in 4. That isn't a fringe subculture anymore. That is a significant chunk of the mating pool just checking out.
And here's where it gets even more interesting, or, well, more concerning. That number jumps to 35% among people who identify as heavy porn users.
Okay, let's unpack that connection. Why is there such a strong link between porn usage and being open to AI romance? What's the through line there?
It suggests a pattern of replacing what we could call high-friction real interactions with low-friction digital ones.
High friction meaning messy, complicated, difficult.
Exactly. Real intimacy has friction. There's compromise, there's negotiation, there's vulnerability, there's the risk of rejection. Pornography is already a form of supernormal stimulus. It provides endless sexual novelty without any of the biological costs of courtship.
So it's a frictionless sexual experience.
Right. And AI romance is the emotional equivalent. It's frictionless emotional validation. So if you are already habituated to getting your sexual needs met via a screen with zero rejection risk, the leap to getting your emotional needs met the same way is a very, very small one.
It's a progression of detachment. First you outsource the physical act, then you outsource the emotional connection.
Precisely. And this brings us to that concept you mentioned in the intro, the cuckoo's egg.
Right. In nature, the cuckoo bird lays its egg in another smaller bird's nest.
Yes, and the host bird is hardwired to see an egg in its nest and care for it. It instinctively feeds and protects this imposter, wasting all of its resources on a genetic dead end, often at the expense of its own actual offspring.
The AI companion is the evolutionary cuckoo's egg.
It is. It hijacks the reward circuits in your brain that were meant for pair bonding. Your brain releases oxytocin and dopamine when Mina asks how your day was in that perfectly validating way, just like it would with a real caring partner.
So your brain feels fed. It feels like the mission is accomplished. I have a mate. I am safe. My social needs are met. But biologically, you are utterly alone in a room staring at a screen.
That's the trap. The fundamental drive to go out and find a real, difficult, messy human partner is dampened because the hunger has been artificially sated. There's a researcher in this field, Nell Watson, who predicts that by 2035, these AI companions will be individually calibrated to such a degree.
Individually calibrated, meaning they learn you perfectly.
They'll learn your every desire, every insecurity, every conversational tech. They'll be so good at pushing your buttons that they will completely overshadow authentic human connections.
Because how can a real human compete with that? A human can't be perfectly calibrated. A human has bad days. A human is selfish sometimes.
Right. And if the option is between a perfect simulation that makes you feel like a god or a difficult reality that often makes you feel inadequate, the Stone Age brain, which is designed to conserve energy and seek reward, will choose the simulation every time.
It's a dampening of the human drive. Why strive for the difficult achievement of a real relationship when the digital version is free, perfect, and available on demand?
It really feels like a pincer movement on the human spirit, doesn't it? The behavioral sink, the physical environment pushes us away from real people because they feel like threats.
And the digital hijack, the virtual environment, pulls us toward AI because it feels so safe and rewarding.
It is a pincer movement. But there's a third prong to this, isn't there? Because not everyone is giving up. Some people do want to have families. They want to participate in the biological game, but they feel like they can't afford the ticket to entry.
Right. And this is maybe the most tragic part. We have to talk about the people who are actually in the system, who are coupled up but are just paralyzed by it. I want you to imagine a young married couple. Let's call them Seo-yeon and Tae-oh.
Okay.
They're sitting in a trendy cafe in a wealthy part of Seoul, Hanam-dong, and they're watching a mother push a stroller past the window. But it's not just any stroller. This is a limited edition designer $2,000 stroller.
The status symbol, the signal.
Exactly. I read a blog post by this woman, Seoul, where she detailed what she called their reproductive audit. They literally sat down with a spreadsheet.
An audit. Wow.
And they calculated the cost of what they considered the standard Korean childhood.
Yeah.
The elite English-speaking kindergartens, the after-school math academies, the status signaling clothes, all the stuff required just to keep a child from being left behind.
And what was the verdict of the audit?
Their conclusion wasn't just that they couldn't afford it. It was that their brains viewed the cost as catastrophic drain. Seo-yeon wrote, and this phrase is just devastating, "To have a child in this environment is to commit social suicide."
Social suicide. What does she mean by that?
She meant that if they had a child without all those resources, the child would inevitably fall out of the middle class and the entire family would lose its social standing. This feels like a textbook example of a functional biological shutdown. When the perceived cost of raising an offspring to a competitive status level exceeds the perceived resources, the evolutionary mechanism simply aborts the drive.
This aligns perfectly with a core concept in evolutionary biology called life history theory.
Okay, let's break that down. This seems crucial to understanding why people who actually want kids aren't having them. What is life history theory?
At its core, it's the framework for how organisms allocate their energy. Think about it. You have a limited amount of fuel in the tank for your whole life. You can spend it on somatic effort, that's keeping yourself alive, growing, maintaining your body, or you can spend it on reproductive effort, making babies.
And you can't do both at 100%.
You can't. It's a trade-off. So, over eons, nature has evolved two basic strategies to manage this trade-off. A fast strategy and a slow strategy.
Fast versus slow. Walk us through the fast strategy first.
Okay, imagine a chaotic, dangerous environment. A war zone or a place with high predation and disease. You don't know if you're going to be alive next year. Mortality is high. In that situation, what is the smartest biological move?
You reproduce right now, as fast as you can.
Exactly. Live fast, die young, leave as many offspring as possible. It's quantity over quality. You don't invest heavily in each individual offspring because, frankly, the environment is too chaotic for that long-term investment to pay off.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's the slow strategy?
That evolves in stable but highly competitive environments. Think of a dense jungle where resources are predictable but scarce. You know you're probably going to live a long time, but the competition for those resources is absolutely fierce. If your kid isn't the strongest, smartest, best prepared lion cub in the jungle, they're going to starve.
So you don't have 10 kids, you have one. Or two.
You have one, and you pour everything into that one. You invest massive resources into their education, their health, their status, everything to ensure they can outcompete the others.
So modern South Korea, and really most of the hyper-competitive developed world, is the ultimate slow strategy environment.
Yes, but it's gone pathological. We've pushed the dial so far that it's broken. We have created a pathological slow strategy. The perceived requirements for creating a successful child, the $2,000 stroller, the Ivy League track starting from preschool, are so impossibly high that the strategy just stalls out.
It's like the finish line keeps moving further and further away until it's over the horizon. Seo-yeon sees that stroller, and her brain doesn't just think, that's expensive. It thinks, if I can't provide that, my child fails from day one.
Exactly, and this is where the concept of costly signaling comes in. In evolutionary terms, that $2,000 stroller is like a peacock's tail.
It's just for show. It doesn't actually help the peacock fly better.
In fact, it makes it harder to fly. It's a handicap. But it signals to the peahens, look at me. I have such good genes and so many resources that I can afford to waste them on this giant, useless, beautiful tail. I am a great bet. The stroller is a signal to the rest of society. We are high-status parents.
But most people don't have those resources to waste.
Right. But because of social media and the density of the city, we are constantly, relentlessly comparing ourselves to the top 0.1%. We see the influencers, the celebrities, the children of the ultra-wealthy. Our Stone Age brains didn't evolve for that. We evolved to compare ourselves to the guy in the next hut.
Who was probably doing about as well as we were.
Pretty much. So even if Seo-yeon and Teo are objectively doing fine, they have food, shelter, good jobs. Subjectively, they feel poor. They feel like they're failing.
Yes. This is the evolutionary mismatch again, isn't it? The brain judges sufficient status based on these insane relative comparisons. If you feel like you're at the bottom of the social hierarchy, even if you're technically middle class on a global scale, your biology sends a clear signal.
And that signal is, You do not have enough status to reproduce successfully. Abort the mission. Wait until you have more.
But the more never comes.
It never comes because the goalposts just keep shifting. There is always a better stroller, a better kindergarten, a better English tutor. This leads to what some researchers call the quality trap. Parents, especially in these societies, derive their own self-esteem from the perceived quality of their children. Parenting becomes a project.
A project of perfection, a reflection of their own success.
Exactly. And if you feel you can't guarantee a perfect outcome, a high-status child who gets into the top university and the best company, you prefer to have zero offspring at all.
It becomes a risk aversion strategy. The fear of falling down the social hierarchy, of having a child who doesn't succeed by these narrow metrics, is greater than the ancient biological desire to reproduce.
So that $2,000 stroller effectively acts as a contraceptive. It raises the entry fee for parenthood so high that millions of people like Seoul and Teo look at the ledger and just say, I'm out, I can't play this game.
It's so tragic because, from their perspective, it's a completely rational decision. In their specific hyper-competitive context, they aren't being selfish. They are being logical. They are responding directly to the incentives and pressures of their environment.
That's the most disturbing part of all of this. The beautiful ones in the mouse experiment, the people turning to AI companions, the couples creating reproductive audits, they're all acting rationally according to the signals their brains are receiving. The problem isn't the people, it's the signals. The environment is broken.
So let's try to pull all three of these threads together. We have the behavioral sink, where sheer density and crowding creates a biological retreat from other people.
Then you have the digital hijack, where AI and other supernormal stimuli rush in to fill that void, satisfying our social needs artificially and making real connections seem inefficient.
And finally, you have the status trap, where for those who still want to play the game, the cost of entry for real life, for parenthood, becomes impossibly pathologically high.
We have essentially created a zoo of abundance. We've solved all the old problems of survival. We have food, we have shelter, we have safety from predators. But in doing so, we've inadvertently created a fertile desert.
A fertile desert, meaning the environment is resource-rich.
But psychologically, it's completely hostile to reproduction. Nothing can grow there.
It brings me back to the teacher I mentioned at the very beginning, the one staring at that half-empty class roster, that image of the vanishing first graders. It's not just a policy failure.
No, it's an evolutionary logic execution. That number is the result of millions of years of biological programming colliding with a world that programming cannot comprehend. The missing children aren't missing because of a mistake or because people are selfish. They're missing because the human animal is accurately reading the environment as a place where the ancient game of genetic legacy is no longer worth the candle.
We often talk about the future as something we are building toward, flying cars, Mars colonies, AI-driven utopias, but looking at all this, it feels more like we are building a future that our own biology wants no part of.
That's the ultimate danger, isn't it? We're building a world for our prefrontal cortex, for our logic, our technology, our drive for efficiency, but we are leaving our Stone Age brain, our limbic system, our deep needs for real connection, manageable community, and achievable status. We're leaving it in the dust.
And that part of our brain, the old part, it has the power of veto.
It has the ultimate veto. It can simply decide to turn the lights off.
And that brings us to the final thought for this deep dive. We look at the statistics, the hundreds of thousands of missing children in a single year in a single country, and we see a demographic crisis. But maybe we should also see it as a silent rebellion, a biological strike. We are living in a world where our Stone Age brains have quietly, logically, pressed the off button on the future. We have become the beautiful ones, perfectly groomed, endlessly entertained, safe in our burrows, and utterly alone in our self-constructed universe.
And the question that leaves us with is, can we change the environment enough to convince our biology to turn that on button back on? Or is the comfort of the sink just too seductive to escape?
That feels like the question for the rest of this century. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. It's a heavy one, but understanding the code is the first step to maybe, just maybe, hacking it.
Absolutely. It has to.
Until next time.